Hey, y'all. So, this is the third one in my new series called Today Did We. It is a series that I'm doing to kind of give you some insight into my new book that is coming out at the end of January in 2026. So, if you're watching this before the book comes out, it's kind of like a preview of what's going to be in the book and some helpful tips that you could use along the way. And if you're watching this after the book has come out, I kind of elaborate a little bit more on each of the chapters in each of these videos. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at one of the chapters called Today Did We Read? All right, and I mean read anything. All right, so first of all, a lot of moms, when I meet with them for coaching sessions and to help them with their homeschooling or to plan their homeschooling or to get started with their homeschooling, um, literally one of the first questions they ask me is, what reading curriculum should I use? Because a lot of moms are very fearful or anxious about teaching their kids how to read. All right. Totally get it. I was one of those moms too. And in hindsight, didn't have to worry about it. But anyway, so what is the best reading curriculum? So what do I tell the moms? Well, actually, the best reading curriculum out there is your library card. I know. Anything and everything you need in order to teach your child to read, you can find at the library. So, the best reading program is super inexpensive. It's actually free. And it doesn't really take that much time. All right. So, really, the best reading curriculum out there, what I mean by your library card, is reading aloud to your kids. So, research tells us, and I talk a lot about this in the book, research tells us that two things really help our kids learn to read, and that is being read to, all right, and that's during read aloud time, and also being surrounded by a literature rich environment, kind of like my bookshelves here. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Now, when it comes to reading aloud, when you read aloud to your kids, they are learning not only how to read, but they're learning sentence structure. They're learning how to comprehend what they're reading. It's the best vocabulary curriculum out there, especially if you're reading really good books. It's the best spelling curriculum out there because the kids, as they're reading on their own, they're seeing how words are spelled correctly. It is the best writing curriculum out there because every writer out there will tell you the best way to become a better writer is to read a lot. Okay. It is also the best speaking curriculum, right? Because as you're reading, you are also, especially if you're one of the ones reading aloud. Okay. So anything and everything that has to do with learning how to read, you can get that by being read to. And then once you learn actually how to read, actually reading independently on your own. It's the best reading program out there is to be read aloud to. All right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But what do I mean by today did we read? Did we read something today? I mean, read anything every day. So yes, that could be academic reading, right? So that could be actually independent reading. That could be read aloud time. That could also be very functional reading, like reading directions to a new game that you got, reading an email that you received, reading the recipe because you're going to be making lunch or baking something for a neighbor. It could be reading comic books. It could be reading dad jokes. It could be reading poetry. And again, it could be academic reading, like reading word problems in your math book or reading something from a living book about history that you're learning about, or reading the directions to a science experiment. When you're driving, reading the signs that are out there. When you're at the grocery store, reading the signs that are in the grocery store. Literally anything and everything counts for reading. So I am almost positive at the end of every day, you're going to be able to ask the question, today did we read? You're going to be able to say yes. It's just a matter of how much did we read? What kind of reading did we do? Who did the reading? Okay. But honest moms, if you can answer the question, yes, we read something today, then you know it was a good day. Okay. Now, so when it comes to, like I said, the two things that really help a child learn how to read, the first two steps are being read to, that's through read aloud, and also being surrounded by a literature rich environment. So, the first thing you want to do, if you already haven't done it, is you want to create this read aloud habit. Okay. Now, I, for one, I talk about this in my book, love my mom to death, but I didn't grow up in a read aloud culture. Like reading aloud was not a priority. It was not a thing. I can't remember one time that my mom read aloud to us or that my dad read aloud to us. Okay. It just wasn't something we did. I never saw my mom reading. She was dyslexic. She hated to read. I did see my dad reading a lot because he loved to read the paper and he loved to do puzzles and stuff. So I did see it modeled through my dad. But as far as being read to or being encouraged to read, like when I was bored or didn't have something to do, going to the library, honest to God, guys, I didn't go to the library except maybe 3 times during my K through 12th grade. And it was when I had to do a research report on something that wasn't in the encyclopedias that we had on our shelves. Okay. Yes, I grew up in the 80s. So we were one of the ones that bought those encyclopedias. Okay. So I didn't grow up in this kind of environment, but I knew when I became a mom, I wanted that to be a huge part of our lives. And so I started reading to my kids when they were in utero. Okay. And I read to them when they were babies, when they were toddlers, when they were taking baths, just anytime and everywhere. I was constantly reading to the kids. So I wanted to make that part of our homeschooling or part of our lifestyle, right? It was part of our culture that we had in our lives. Okay. So that was something that I was very intentional about. But I know that there's a lot of moms out there who just don't feel like they have enough time to do it, or maybe reading themselves isn't fun, or they feel self conscious about reading aloud. So they don't want to do it. They find it like they don't know what to read. They can't seem to find books that their kids might want to enjoy, or they've tried it in the past and it's not this peaceful, beautiful Laura Ingalls Wilder's moment where everyone's sitting around the fireplace while Papa is reading and everyone is attentively listening and paying attention. It's like mayhem happening all around you, right? And so maybe your experiences of reading aloud to your kids have not been enjoyable, and so you don't want to go there. You don't want to do that. Okay, but I'm here to share with you just how simple it is to start this read aloud habit. Okay. Now let's do the math. I'm going to do the math for you, but it's really simple. So if you read aloud to your kids or to your family, just 20 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, that's all you got to carve out, 20 minutes a day. And let's just say that you homeschool 5 days a week. Okay. So that's going to be 100 minutes of you reading aloud to your kids a week. That's a lot of minutes. All right. Now, if you read 100 minutes a week, right, and there's 4 weeks in a month, that's going to be 400 minutes of read aloud a month. Now, when I convert that for you, that's like 6.5 hours of read aloud a month. That's a lot. Okay. Now, let's just say that you do traditional schooling. And so you take a summer break. So you only do 10 months of official schooling. Okay. So 400 minutes a month times 10 months, not even 12 months. Okay. That's 4,000 minutes a year. When you convert that, that's like 67 hours of read aloud time. Okay. Now, most Audible chapter books last between 4 to 6 hours. And so when you break that down, that's like 12 books a year or a book a month. Okay. And that's just doing 20 minutes of intentional read aloud time during your school time. So that's not counting reading during the weekends. That's not counting during summer breaks if you do take summertime breaks, right? That's not counting bedtime stories. That's not the time you're reading the Bible with the family. You're doing family devotions. That's not counting the functional reading that your kids might be doing because they are learning how to play a new game, or the academic reading that they're doing for their history or their science or their math word problems. And it's not even including their independent reading once they start to read on their own. All right. So when we add all that in, you are reading well over 100 hours a year. So just trying to implement 20 minutes a day really is a doable, realistic goal. Okay. Now, keep in mind your read aloud time it's not going to be beautiful and peaceful all the time. Okay. It's definitely a habit that you have to cultivate. So if you need to start with 10 minutes a day, start with 10 minutes a day, work your way up to 20 minutes a day. We got up to about 30, 35 minutes. It kind of depended on what we were reading, how the kids were feeling and things like that. Okay. Here's a little tidbit too. If you can start on end on a good note. So even if you get to a spot and it's like 20 minutes are up, go ahead and stop, or 30 minutes is up for the day. And your kids start saying, no, 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 keep reading, keep reading, keep reading. Every now and then, don't stop, because it will keep them engaged and they'll be more attentive the next day when you start to read aloud. Or, like in my daughter's case, she didn't want to wait. She would start reading the book on her own so she could get ahead because she couldn't wait. Okay. So, just a little tip for you. Um, also, one way to try and cultivate this read aloud habit where it's not complete and total chaos every time it happens is have your expectations, don't lower them, just keep them realistic. Okay. So, depending on the age of your kids and how many kids you have, if you have a baby and a toddler, be realistic. Your read aloud time might be 5-10 minutes. That might be all you can do. Or maybe you do it during nap time. Okay. Or you listen to Audible in the car, right? So, all of that counts. But some of the things that a lot of experienced homeschool moms do is, first of all, we would read aloud on the couch. So we didn't really have a schoolroom. So everyone would get comfy in the front room. They would lounge on the sofa. They would roll around on the floor, whatever. They would get comfy, right? So we weren't always like sitting at the table doing our read aloud. And I always had a basket that I pulled out during read aloud time to help the kids keep their hands occupied, because I've found, especially with my son, the more their hands were occupied, the more they could concentrate and listen, right? So, and it depended on what age, like I said, the age the kids were, what they were interested in. But some years there were puzzles in there. Some years there were drawing materials in there. Some years there were Legos in there, or building blocks. Sometimes there were, what else did I have in there? When my daughter was trying to finger crochet one year, and my son had his baseball cards in there, Rubik's Cube, but things like that. So anything, Play-Doh when they were younger, oh, the Play-Doh really kept them busy. So I would put those kind of objects and items into our read aloud basket. And they just knew that when they started to have trouble and they were fidgeting or they're having trouble concentrating, that they could pull something out from that basket to keep themselves kind of occupied and their hands occupied. If my son needed to roll around, I let him roll around. Okay. I often had them eat first or bring some sort of snack into the front room, and water bottles, of course, before we started to read aloud, because that helped with the interruptions as well. Okay. So it is doable to create this read aloud habit. And it truly is the best thing you could do to help your child learn to read and to become a lifelong reader who does it for pleasure and enjoyment. Okay. Now, remember, the other thing that is there are two important steps to take before you actually sit down and teach your kids how to read. And the other one is to have your home, have them be surrounded by literature-rich environment. Research tells us kids that have at least 50 books or more in their home score better on tests if that's important to you. They learn to read a little bit earlier if that's important to you. Their vocabulary is much bigger than students or kids who aren't surrounded by books. Okay, so it's not just being read to, but it's having books at their disposal. Okay, so another thing to think about doing is to curate a home library. All right, and I know that that can get expensive. But what we did was, if you followed me for a while, you know that we didn't really use a formal curriculum for much of anything. We didn't have a formal writing curriculum till the kids were like 7th or 8th grade. We never used a formal history curriculum. We hardly ever used a formal science curriculum. I did use a formal reading curriculum. I'll talk about that in a minute with my son for 2 years. But so we had these in our budget money for curriculum, but I wasn't buying curriculum. So I often used that money that we budgeted for our homeschool to buy new books. And so at the end of at the beginning of each year, when I was planning what we were going to learn, and the kids told me the things that they wanted to learn about, I would purposely and intentionally use that money to buy new books that had to do with those subjects. I updated our reference books. My daughter loved particular authors and series, and I just found it much easier because she was such a voracious reader to have those books on the shelf so that she could read those at her pleasure, because she's one of these people that also likes to reread and reread books. Okay. So it was worth the investment. I got my son lots of biographies because he liked those kinds of things. I got him lots of books, how-to books and baseball books and things like that. Lots of Bibles and different devotions. So I filled up our bookshelves with books that I knew the kids would love, with books we could use in our learning, but also reading for pleasure and things like that. I would go to thrift stores. I loved our local library because they had a used book sale every month, and they had a room designated for their books that they were taking off the shelves that you could buy for like a dime, a nickel, sometimes a dollar. I'm dating myself, right? So take the time to build up your home library. Okay. Then that way, when your kids do come to you and say, I'm bored, I don't know what to do, you could always say, go read a book. Here's one I think you'll absolutely love. Or you could strew books around. Um, it, in my daughter's bedroom, she had her bookshelf, and that's where we kept all of our fantasy type books and things like that. In my son's bedroom, I kept all of his favorite books, but also like all of the how-to books. And then we had a basket in the front room. That was like our unit study books that we got from the library. It was also our read aloud books that we were using. So just surround your kids with all kinds of books. All right. Also, make a habit of going to your local library, whether it's once a week, once a month, every 6 weeks or so, and just make that part of your home culture as well. Okay. All right. Now, the question I also get is, how old should my child be when they learn to read? All right. Or my child is in first grade and they're not reading yet. Or my child is in kindergarten and they're not reading yet. And moms really get very anxious about that. The main reason for that is because we're told by these so-called experts that our kids should be reading by kindergarten or first grade. And if they're in third grade and they haven't learned how to read independently yet, or their reading isn't fluent, then they're being left behind, right? And all of that is hogwash, all right? So when it comes to learning to read, it has a natural development stage, just like kids have a natural development range of learning to talk and learning to walk and learning to potty train. Reading is in that same natural development range. So kids can learn to read from age 4 to 14. That's the natural range. Now, the majority of them will learn to read around the age 7, 8, 9, depending who you talk to, right? Some kids will learn to read at age 4 on their own without help. And most kids will learn to read in the middle range, right? With help. Okay. And then there will be some students and some kids who don't learn to read or read fluently until age 14, right? But that is a normal range. So don't stress if your kid is 10, 11, 12, and they're still not reading, or they're not reading fluently. Okay. Now, if your son or daughter does seem to be exhibiting some signs of dyslexia, or they're struggling, or you think they're late bloomers, or you really don't know what, it's just that they do seem to struggle more than maybe your other child did, or it's bothering them, right? They may not be dyslexic. They may not have a visual processing disorder, but they might. Okay. So my suggestion is always that if you think your child might have some sort of learning challenge or some sort of reading difficulty, learning to decode, it's very laborious for them, or they do have trouble learning their phonics and matching the letters to the sounds and things like that, don't panic. especially if they're 6, especially if they're 8, especially if they're 10. It's okay. Remember, they just might be late bloomers. But if your mama gut is saying, I'm not sure this is quite right. Then just treat your child as if they are dyslexic. And so, what I mean by that is go ahead and get a phonetic based um, reading curriculum or program, right? And I'll talk about some of those in a minute, and teach your child how to read with that. All right. Then, as they learn how to read, if they aren't dyslexic, then great, no problem. Now you've just given them a very solid foundation in phonics and a really solid reading foundation. If they are dyslexic, then you just started the remediation. Okay. And so you've already been using some of the things and techniques that you were going to use once he was officially diagnosed anyway. Okay. And then other ways that you could just go ahead and treat your child as if they are dyslexic, whether you know it or not, or they've been officially diagnosed or not, or you just think there might be something going on there. Just start making the accommodations now. So if they need extra time for some writing, give them extra time. If they do have dysgraphia, or writing is very difficult, let them dictate to you. Let them do speech to text. Let them use Grammarly. Let them use spell check. Let them use Audible. Let them go ahead, and there's some great things on laptops where you can highlight anything on the computer, whether it's internet or it's a book or whatever. You highlight it and you hit speech, and the computer actually reads it out loud, so they can follow with their eyes while they're hearing it. There are just so many things that you could be doing to make different accommodations for them. And then again, like I said, if you find out later on they weren't dyslexic, they were just like late bloomers, then you've just given them confidence and helped them express themselves in a variety of ways. And now off they go, right? But if they are dyslexic, then you've already started making those accommodations for them. Okay. All right. Now, if you do have a child who is a late bloomer or struggling reader, or maybe dyslexic or whatever, try reading wordless picture books. Those are awesome because as you're looking at the illustrations, the kids are creating their own story and their own dialogue that go with each of the pictures. So the kids, they're very open-ended too. So the story can be different every single time. But the students who are struggling when it comes to decoding the written word can still feel very confident and enjoy the process of reading and writing and creating by reading these wordless picture books. Okay. And remember, Audible does count. So even if your kid is reading a book by listening to it, that counts. I actually use Audible a whole lot more now than I used to as an adult, just mainly because I love to read, but I don't have as much time in the day to actually sit down to read a book, and my eyes are giving out on me. It gives me headaches now to read small print. And so oftentimes I'd rather just put an Audible on, and I can get through books and books and books while listening to them, as opposed to sitting down and reading them for text. So if it counts for us, it counts for your kids. So Audible does count, and it counts for you too. So if you didn't get to your read aloud today, right, and you have to go cook, then let's Audible narrate a story for you, or read your read aloud while all of you are listening, and you're cooking, or you're changing the baby's diaper, or you're nursing, and the kids are also drawing or doing something while everyone is listening. Okay, so Audible does count. Now, let me talk real quick about reading curriculum recommendations, because these I don't really get into in my book, because I talk more about the importance of reading each day independently and through read aloud, and what that looks like and things like that. Okay. However, if you do have a child, which most of us do, who don't teach themselves how to read at the ripe old age of 4 or 5, and they do need some assistance in learning how to read. First of all, like I said, you can use your library card. If they don't have any kind of, you know, reading challenge or some sort of dyslexia, which just means that they process and decode the words a little bit differently. Okay, it goes to a different part of the brain. You can literally use your library card to go get very simple books like the Bob books and Dr. Seuss books and nursery rhyme books and the level 1 readers. And you could teach your kids how to read just using those books. Okay, so play lots of word games and lots of letter games so that they could connect the word, the sound of each letter to what the letter looks like. And then use real simple books with patterns in them and maybe even with rhyming schemes to teach them how to read. So you really can do that. Okay. Now, if you need something or you want something with a little bit more, excuse me, with a little bit more direction, but you don't want anything super fancy, I highly recommend the reading curriculum called Phonics Pathways. It's a book about this thick, and it literally walks you through what to do, and it's meant to be read with your child who's learning to read and your emergent reader. Okay, everything you need is in this book. I think it costs $20. You can get it on Amazon. That's the one I use to teach my daughter how to read. Super simple. Okay. And then we use Bob books and the Bernstein Bears I Can Read series and Dr. Seuss for her to practice with. Okay. So I love that one as well. 5 in a Row is a really great one. It doesn't teach your kids how to read, but it's a great quote unquote curriculum to use for read aloud. Because remember, that is one way that you can teach your child how to read. So check out the 5 in a Row curriculum if you're looking for something to help with your read aloud time. Okay. Also, if your child does seem to be exhibiting maybe some signs of dyslexia or some sort of reading issue, like I said, use a very phonetic based Orton Giggingham phonics program that's based with that style. So my favorite is Play and Talk by Amy Usey. That is a fabulous one that you can use with all levels of readers, from not reading at all to older students who just need help. It helps with their spelling, it helps with their writing, it helps with their typing. I love Play and Talk. That's a great one to use. It's like a 2-year program, and you can use it with all of your kids. So it's one of those curriculum you can buy once and use it with everybody. Okay. All About Reading is great. I personally don't think you have to do All About Reading and then do All About Spelling. I pretty much just started with All About Spelling because all of the spelling rules are basically your reading rules. So if you want to save money, just do one of those. Also, another one that's very phonetic based that will give your kids a good foundation with the phonics is the Barton system. Love that one. That one's a really good one. And the Logic of Language. That one's also a really good one. These are all very expensive though. Okay. But they do come with, they're very multi-sensory. So they do come with tiles. They come with games. They come with readers. They come with all of it. Okay. So those are just some of my favorites that can get you started with helping your child learn how to read. Okay. All right. So when all else fails and you're thinking to yourself, what a waste this day was, you know it was a good enough day. Okay, mamas, take this to heart. I learned this the hard way, but once I realized it, it was life-giving and life-saving. You know it was a good enough day if you did 2 things. If you read from the good book every day with your family, that's the Bible, and you read from a good book with your family, that's some sort of chapter book, then you know it was a good enough day. Give yourself grace. There's always tomorrow. If your kids are young, there's always next week. There's always next year. Okay. So if you read from God's word and you read from a good chapter book, it's a good enough day. And then give yourself grace to do just a little bit more the next day. Okay. All right. Now, shameless plug. This is one of the chapters from my new book that's going to be coming out in January of 2026. The title of the chapter is Today Did We Read? And this chapter is full of all of the different ways that you can read together as a family, what your kids can read on their own. I talk about twaddle, I talk about classics, I get into all kinds of stuff. The appendix has lots of books for you to read as a mom, book lists for your kids to read. Also, if you're looking for books for your kids to read, don't forget about Sarah Mackenzie's Read Aloud Revival. She's got lots of recommendations there. But anyway, in my book, I do, and I have lots of research in it. I answer lots of your questions about this natural progression or natural range of development for readers so that the whole book is not about lowering your expectations. It's about keeping your homeschool days simple and your expectations realistic. And I help you do that by giving you 9 separate questions that you can ask yourself either at the end of each day or while you're planning. Okay. So thanks for hanging with me, and be on the lookout for the next one in the series.